So Lisa Welchman is a leading digital expert in digital governance, in the rise of the information age, and in diversity in technology. It's my pleasure to introduce her as the keynote speaker at UXPA 2019. Let's give her a round of applause. She wrote the best-selling digital governance book, Managing Chaos, and I'm really excited for what she's going to share with us today. So thank you so much, everybody, and I'll leave you in the capable hands of Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. I think I'm about to make a mess with this cane, which is, no, it's good. I want to have it there as my friend. I'm not usually with a cane, but I traveled too much and threw out my back. But I'm here, and I have a new appreciation for people who have limited mobility. The world's not set up for them. We can do better. Anyhow, good morning. I want to thank UXPA and Sarah and Jack and the board and everyone else for inviting me to give the opening keynote. Thank you all for being here and giving me your attention at the beginning of the event. I know it's kind of at the beginning, and when I'm attending a conference, it's right here at the very start, where I'm hoping that I'm going to learn the thing, right, that's going to make a difference to me either professionally or personally. We're all sort of scrambling one way or another to make a difference somehow. And we all need input and guidance and insights from other people to get there. So I hope this event serves that purpose for all of us. So when I was asked to open the event, I was kind of heartened to see some of the topics that we don't always see. I'm especially excited to hear about some of the talks that focus on ethics and the impact of the web, and not only just how to keep making things, right? We need to talk, yes, about how to make things and make things properly and well, but we also need to talk about the impact of what we do. So just a little bit about me, because I'm not one of you, really. I was an early web maker, a webmaster, and that's kind of almost an extinct breed of digital maker. That breed could stand up a web server, index a search engine, conduct usability studies, pick technologies and install them, write HTML, sort of use Photoshop, like just enough to be dangerous. And we knew a little bit of Unix as well, and just enough to be dangerous too. That was expected back in the day before the web had sort of taken over so much. I still run into a few webmasters or smaller, in the sort of smaller, less digitally mature organizations, but mostly we're a dying breed. So today, an organization's digital presence is managed by a set of siloed experts, right, who unfortunately are often playing tug of war with each other to prove who adds the most value. Don't like to see that, it's common. Let me tell you that from my vantage point of a management consultant who designs digital teams and tries to help them collaborate more effectively, you're all important, right? So we need to sort of stop that competition. I've called this talk Moving Towards a Safer and More Compassionate Web. It's a new talk for me, hence I've got the notes, plus with my leg, I'm on a few medications that make me a little absent-minded, so I've got some notes here. But moving towards a safer and more compassionate web is something that I feel really deeply about. I'm 55. As I like to say to people, I've written all the big checks of life. I own my house. I've gotten my son through college. Hopefully, those are sort of kind of the big milestones. I can sort of back off a little bit about the power of making money and being a householder that a lot of you from looking at you are either ramping up to or are in the middle of right now. And so I've been thinking about what I want to do with the rest of my working days. And I look out in the web and I think that's what I want. I want to try and help us move to a safer and more compassionate web, right? Whatever I can do to shift some of the harsher dynamics of the web into that direction is great for me, and that's my intention. Intention's important. In many ways, intention is everything. We all work on the web. Some of you who were around during the early days recall that we operated in a zone that was largely free of intention, right? It was all about possibilities, any kind of possibility. It was about the delight of what a new technology could do. We were playful, cocky, blinkered, and entirely sure that we were doing things that had never before been tried in the history of humankind. We tried anything. In the early days of any new technology, this is the dynamic that prevails. And for me, a philosophy major with a love of symbolic logic and semantics, it was the simplicity and the depth of the web that got me hooked. The joy of writing HTML in Notepad and watching it magically render as a website through a Mosaic or a Netscape browser. And it was the idea that anyone in the world who had access to the internet could see what I'd made instantly. That was a paradigm shift. It was freeing and outrageous. No more editorial gates. The idea that no one else was deciding what could and could not be published was inspiring to me, an aspiring writer who'd faced down a sea of rejection letters from people I'd never met, but who somehow got to decide whether or not the broader public heard my voice. The next 25 years have been a ride. I've watched the web expand in good and bad ways, until now when it seems like it might break. Didn't happen suddenly. It's like boiling a frog. We've been in this pan for a while, and every year the temperature has risen, but no one's really wanted to talk about it. And now we're afraid it might be too late. But it's not. I've been talking about web governance and digital governance for a while because I saw early what could happen if the web, which is only an accumulation of what organizations, governance, and individuals put online, I saw how it was growing ungoverned. I had a special vantage point inside of a large .com early in the 1990s, and I could sort of see the chaos coming over the horizon. I saw how a lack of clear organizational, industry, national, and global policy and standards around digital spaces left the door open for low quality and eventually misuse and abuse of the web. If there's any special skill that I have, anything at all, it's in understanding the long-term consequences of a situation, the causal chain. Studying logic does that to your head, but most people, and me at times, were high on the web in those early days. We were sucked in by how easy it was to join the party, make money, and shift the power of the economy away from the old blue-chip bellwethers to a new breed of business, the .com. We told ourselves that this was going to be different, and it was a new day. But then came Web 2.0. Anybody remember that expression? And social media and mobile, and with them more possibilities, including the transformation of political spaces. Then came privacy violations, data breaches, online hate speech. We've moved beyond complaining about some of the humorously bad online experiences that businesses put up and wondering whether or not the web is going to dismantle the world community altogether. We look around and see the web, and control of it and access to it is uneven and skewed in the direction of the male, the wealthy, and the white. We see a culture of aggression and abuse in online spaces. We see fundamental violations of individual human rights by our .com darlings, the ones that were supposed to be different. We look at all of this and we seem to be at a loss for what to do. But I have some ideas. We could improve how we govern our digital spaces. We could pause and make some difficult course corrections with intention. I want to talk about what that would mean. I want you to walk away from this talk understanding how and why the web fell into disarray and feeling like there's a pathway out. I want you to identify a role you could play along that pathway. I'm an optimist at heart. While it may feel like humanity is in a uniquely bad position with the web, and in some ways maybe we are, the human population has been in this sort of position before with other technologies. We can figure this out and we can fix it. But in order to do that, we have to be clear about what's gone wrong. So, a question for you. How bad does a thing have to get before we stop and take the time to fix it? The answer to that question is pretty bad. Human beings in deeply industrialized countries have shown over and over again that we'll push ourselves and others beyond the limits of now widely accepted human rights standards in order to prove just how quickly and deeply we can deploy and profit from new products and technologies. Cotton gins, sewing machines, sugar, chocolate, the phones in our hands, and the growth of the web have all benefited from this tendency. It's not one of our best traits. Many of the artifacts that we cherish, temples and cathedrals, great walls, railways, some of our most grand accomplishments are weighted down with a hard-to-hear backstory. So hard to hear that we often mute them so that we can tell the good story, the story of the winner. One could argue that the tendency towards exploitation is part of the human condition, that there's no way off the track of exploitation, and that the best thing to do is to make sure that you're on the winning side of the battle. But extreme exploitation is not a necessary antecedent for technological progress. I can't believe that. I won't believe it. In order to grow the web, we don't have to walk on other people's backs. So I want to be clear. I'm not going to argue that the web will ever be completely perfect and safe space. That would be a naive stance. I'm arguing that with better governance of what is put online, that we can build a safer and more compassionate web. Now, to be honest with you, building a career and having a genuine interest in digital governance has not been the best life choice. No one knows what it is, and to a lot of people it sounds boring and evil. Governance is simple. It's helping people and organizations work better together by being intentional about how they work. Governance for digital spaces simply demands that a business know what it is making and putting online, who is making it, and what impact those things have on the people who use them, and to be accountable for the consequences. Governance is a strategic organizational concern, and governing frameworks must be built with the entire scope of an organization in mind, not just one product or service. When properly designed, a digital governance framework puts in place the right level of control. It provides a set of policies so people know exactly what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And it establishes a set of standards so that digital workers can get to business working instead of fighting about who gets to make decisions. And depending on what the organization makes, those controls can be very tight or very loose. It just depends on what's required. Ever since the early days of working in the web, I've been saying to anyone who will listen, including my family that doesn't ever really want to hear about anything that I'm doing, you think talking about digital governance to you guys is hard. Imagine like dinner parties, dates. It ain't a great scene. But ever since the early day, I've been saying that one day, just one day, someone or some company is going to do something so fabulously crazy online that people will be forced to the table of governance. And every year I've seen these things happen, like really bad experiences, data breach, lack of accessibility, privacy violations, and so on, and nothing. Nothing. We're still just building and throwing online. But then came the 2016 US election. And I find that after almost 20 years of crazy, that maybe that day I've been waiting for has finally come. But still, there's some resistance to governance, even now. Over the years, many of the businesses, especially the .coms that I've worked with, have begged me to use a different word than governance. Governance to them means a straitjacket of compliance that stifles creativity and new ideas. It's lining up and marching in lockstep. I have to pull out the examples that settle folks down, so I'll do that for you too. I point out that Apple had one of the tightest governing frameworks ever, a benevolent dictatorship of sorts, a governance model where one person or a very small group of people make all the decisions. I point out to them that Wikipedia has a comprehensive yet more inclusive governance model than a place like Apple. and that without Wikipedia's very specific set of rules, we'd likely see the sort of free-for-all we see in places like Facebook and Twitter. And there's other things. Our history of technology in our company is full of examples of things that are standards-based. There's telephony, there's typewriters. I have a friend who's writing a book on typewriting keyboards right now and the standards behind that. You all know if you've traveled the world and you've sat down in front of a colleague's laptop from a different country and you start typing and you think you've got it down and you don't because they've just moved one key and it's crazy making, or just a totally different paradigm. Telegraphy, all that code, radio waves and radio frequencies, all standards-based. I'm talking to you, I'm speaking to you in English, American English, and there are standards around that which allow you to understand and us to communicate with each other. Music, my love. I sing, I play the piano. I love music, all types of music. It's a great communicator, but there are standards around it. Even in the most freest forms of music, jazz, they operate over a standards-based framework that have chord progressions and rules about improvisation, freestyling. Free jazz is one of the things that probably doesn't have rules, which makes it harder to listen to. But it's fun to participate in as well. There's also movable type, right? Things that are standards-based as well. Television, which is going out to the web right now, but there's standards around frequencies for television as well. And it allowed Lieutenant Uhura, who was an inspiration for me to think that I could do and be something else other than a maid. There's film, right? So there's all these things that we love and that can create immense creativity, right? That are all standards-based. So it's kind of enough with the nonsense, right? I often tell designers that are often the loudest haters of governance that their pattern libraries and Pantone color mandates are nothing more than standards. I tell them that standards are an essential part of existence. They're rules, and rules are great. They're the rule. They're not the exception to the rule. Standards are the rule. They're not the exception to the rule. I tell them that nature likes standards. I tell them that our beloved internet and web are all standards-based. Many of you all work primarily on the internet and web, and you would not be here without the W3C, a standards-bearing body, right? And then there are things like the beautiful Fibonacci sequence of nature that causes beautiful replication that we see all over the place, standards-based. And then if you can't believe any of that, there's us and our 26 pairs of chromosomes. When there are alterations of that, there are problems. We are standards-based. Standards are the norm. When we're not working with standards, we're probably creating something that might be dangerous or abnormal. It might be creative, that's fine, but when you bring it to scale, you're going to have a lot of difficulty. Standards, I would argue, enable collaboration and healthy growth of technologies. They don't hinder it. So, after all of that, they agree. Standards are okay. But they still aren't interested in governing frameworks. And that's when we get down to the heart of the matter. It's not really that people don't want limits and rules per se. It's that they're afraid of having unreasonable controls imposed on them that by people that they don't know or that they don't trust, or who they're afraid don't understand what they're making. That's a reasonable fear, which is why governing models need to be intentionally designed. My book is called Managing Chaos, but the subtitle is Digital Governance by Design. Not digital governance by accident or digital governance that you can stand, right? But digital governance by design. It's a reasonable fear to be afraid of having these things imposed on you, right? You want to have governing models that are intentionally designed, not backed into by accident based on a business model that values their own positive fiscal performance as the sole measure of success. That's what we have now. We have accidental governance, and it's ineffective and dangerous. People think that by not designing a governing framework, that they're just avoiding the whole governance thing. When you get a group of people together, you will create a governing dynamic. It's either by accident or by intention. What we got right now online, all that crazy shit, by accident, right? This is not what we want, right? We need to grow up and realize that we need to design these governing frameworks. Another excuse for not governing digital is that designers and developers and writers say that they don't have time. So I'm going to rant a little bit about this one. Several years back, I gave a talk called We Are the Architects at EuroIA. And the thrust of the architect was that if information architects were the architects of the information age and the web, then weren't they, we, as a community, along with UX developers and all the others that manipulate online spaces, weren't we responsible for the mess that was a hard-to-navigate web, bad search, and other online annoyances? So the talk was well received, but I was cornered in the hallway, and nicely accused of promoting values that stifle innovation and creativity. I was told that I was old and old-fashioned and didn't get it. I was trying to insert governance into a flow that was taking us all to a great place. Agility was what was needed, so we could get there faster. Where we were going, I sort of don't know. Well, actually, I do know. Despite the popular .com mythology of save the world through trickle-down altruism, which is often a substantive part of the business model, most .coms have the same goals as the old-fashioned bellwethers they were hoping to replace back in the day, the ones that were on top of the stock market heap and got knocked off and now they're on the top. And those goals were to make money, and a lot of it, as quickly as possible. The urgency behind agile development usually isn't an urgency to solve problems for the human condition, to get us all higher up on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The agility is the push of wanting to be the first out of the gate in order to accumulate wealth. It's the push of wanting to be first and fastest and having the most, because that's how the dominant culture of the web, the .com, measures success. I have nothing against speed, nothing against profitability, but getting to a wrong place quickly or to multiple wrong places quickly and with harm doesn't really give you anything of value. And holding on to this theme of agility at all costs leads businesses, particularly those run by folks who've never seen much of the deep downside of life, to believe that their rights and the rights of their businesses are greater than the rights of the people and communities they serve and the customers who buy their products. And many of us buy into that as well. We're intoxicated by or connected on social media, or if you're much younger than me, you've never operated in a world without these places. We wonder how we would ever live without them, even as they're sort of confining and narrowing our existence into smaller and less tolerant spaces and hoarding financial resources, the planet. It's time to protest and demand something better. I'm not a Luddite. I want the web. I just want it to be better. We deserve better. So, how do we get here? If you read even just a little about the history of technology, and at the end of my talk I have a recommendation for a great book on the history of information technology, it's just great to kind of understand what we've done already. Sometimes we're running so fast in the digital space, we don't realize that some of the problems have already been solved, and while the specifics of the dynamics that are going on with the web might be unique to the web, the overall arc of it is the same. We've seen this, we've done this before, which is why I'm confident that we can fix it. So if you read even just a little bit about the history of technology, you'll quickly learn that human inventions generally don't fall into good and healthy patterns automatically, right? We have to make it happen through intentional design, you all, and through governance, the sole cheerleader. Why is that? Well, because anything that we can invent, anything that exists really, always contains a measure of good and bad. In the seed of any new technology lies the exciting capacity for benefit and good, as well as the capacity for abuse and harm. And when that seed is watered, the bad stuff grows right alongside with the good. It's up to us, people, to manage that outcome, to make sure that we prune away as much of the bad as we can. We have to work to keep things safe. It's not going to happen automatically. It's not going to happen magically. So, one of the earliest automobiles, I can't remember because I can't remember whether or not this was the first automobile. Clearly, this isn't the first automobile, the time of the first automobile. People are dressed wrong. I think they dragged it out to try to give it a test run and show it off. But early automobiles are interesting. Early automobile usage resulted in a myriad of never seen or thought about transportation-related injuries. Decapitations by windshields and other physical mutilations led to the invention of safety glass and a wave of product safety features imposed upon car manufacturers through regulation and consumer participation. It also spawned a new discipline of automobile safety. Seatbelts were invented and the patent gifted to the world, but it also took a strong push of regulation to make them a mandatory feature in the automobile. And even then, we participate in our own safety by actually buckling that belt before we hit the road. There's always a component of free will to safety, and for adults, that's okay. So I've put together this timeline. I'm gonna sneak away from my sheet for a second. I popped this in last night. I wasn't gonna show it to you, but I just want you to understand that the details aren't really important, but if you read this book that I'm going to recommend at the end, which is called The Information, it's a book by James Glick. It talks about the history of information dissemination from talking drums of Africa all the way through the internet. It is really quite fascinating. It's thick. If you're geeky like me, it's kind of a fun book to read. But one of the things that I took away from it, that there's always this persistent arc. So there's multiple components. You've got legislation, innovation, standards, and safety, right? And so first you get the innovation. Right? You got a first gasoline-powered car. That's super cool, right? And then you have these innovations that go around it, which are shatterproof glass. There's some things like first recorded fatality. That's not I think I put something in the wrong place. First automated traffic control system, airbags, like all of these things happened. I put that first recorded fatality in because it didn't fit anywhere else, right? But that happened in 1896, so 20-some years before somebody actually recorded there was a fatality. I'd imagine people died in cars before that, right? It's sort of like things happened in history before recorded history. We're always talking about recorded history, and it's like, yeah, but that's like this much, and there's a bunch of stuff we did otherwise as well. So you have all these sort of innovations of things that happened that were about safety, but nothing really happened with them. And you can see if you start to lay these things out that there's a relationship in the timing between when an innovation happens and when it actually becomes a mandatory standard, right? So let's see, crumple zones invented in 1937 and they were standard in 1959, right? Or started to become a standard in 1959. Same thing with seat belts. 1957, standard in 1968, right? What pushed it? One of the things when you read about technology, it's always policy. None of these people ever self-regulate. They know what breaks. It's not like they don't know this stuff is happening. It always takes the government, as much as they make us crazy sometimes, it always takes the government, NGOs, some sort of regulation to push in and make people install these things. And then we get all the way towards the very end. We start to get what I consider to be like proactive safety. Like instead of waiting and reacting to something, we're like, how can we just figure out what might happen that could go wrong in the first place and build better in the first place, right? So there's this path, and it always happens all of the time. And it always takes all of these components. There has to be a level of innovation, there has to be a level of regulation, and there has to be a level of participation by people who, like us, who are going to be fastening our seatbelts and pushing and demanding for these types of standards. So I think that the arc of the web and the internet safety and internet and web safety aren't going to be any different. And I think it's really time that we got kind of smart about it and wise about it, because I think we're kind of quickly going downhill. We're seeing sort of the equivalent of unforeseen road accidents, complete with fatalities on our web now. And it's really going to take a concerted effort by business, the regulatory community, which includes associations, governments, NGOs, and consumers to make it safe. Is it cool? Is it sexy? Is it fun? No. But I don't care anymore. Like, honestly, we have got to get this done. And it's going to require all of us to participate. Technologies and the people who make them need to be governed. Yes, it's annoying. We all want to be free and do what we want, particularly people wealthy enough to think that they're not dependent on others. But that's not really, from my perspective, a mature worldview. It's an adolescent view, right? Thinking that you can do whatever you want and that there's no consequences. I also think that living in community means taking care of each other. And that means limiting the rights of the individual and businesses in order to serve the greater good. It's a balance that must be struck and intentionally designed. So how do we do that for the web? First, I want to look at and understand our own story. I'm going to get really basic, so pardon me. I see a few gray hairs out there. But the more that I talk and the older I get and time passes, I realize just how little some of us know about sort of the internet and the web and the basics, right? So I was working on a project with a content strategist once, and I had written some blog posts, and I had, in the blog post, talked about the internet and the web. And she said, oh, saying internet and web is so old-fashioned, they're the same thing. And I was like, no, they're not. And really, she's gonna go down to the mat with me on this, right? That the internet and the web were the same thing. They are not the same thing. So let's talk about some fundamentals, just in case if you all are out there cringing, and you might have been that content strategist, that's cool. Right, there's plenty of things that my parents know that I don't know, right? So there's no shame and blame in this, but let's just get on a line here, right? The internet and the web are two different things. These are pictures of the inventor of the internet, inventors, because it's always, I think, a collaboration, and the inventor of the World Wide Web. The internet is older, so the inventor of the internet, Vint Cerf, is older. The web is younger, so the inventor of the web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, is younger. And I found these pictures, I thought they were funny, because obviously lots of people make this mistake all the time. So they're two different things, and the internet was invented in 1983. I'd imagine some of you might not have been born. I was in my first year of college, right? And the World Wide Web was conceived of in 1989. So I was just finishing up grad school. The web is one way to use the internet, and email is another, and the list goes on and on and on. But just so you can understand, those two things are different things. So I'm gonna go off, this is my favorite thing to do, honestly, with you, and you can pick anything. So in your head, as I'm talking about this, you can pick design, you can pick content, you can pick a website, you can pick mobile, you can pick the entire World Wide Web, you can talk about the internet. Doesn't matter. When you're designing something new, right, particularly a technology, it's gonna go through a certain arc, and I want you to just really understand how that happens and how it's worked, right? So here's what happens. You've got this kind of moment where somebody creates a new technology, and you have this eureka moment, and everybody's going, this is like the best thing in the world, right? It's super fantastic. It works, kind of. We don't really quite know what we're doing with it, but we're gonna try out a bunch of new things, right? So you do. You try out different, test new things, you figure out what's gonna happen. So that happened with websites, it happened with the World Wide Web on the whole, right? It happened with mobile, it happened with social, it's happening with different new applications of artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, all those buzzwords that, depending on the year, that get swung around. right? So everybody tries it. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're inside of an organization, maybe the first website domain was bought by somebody in marketing. I've worked with a lot of people early back in the day when the biggest governance challenge they had was getting back ownership of the company domain name because it had been purchased on somebody's personal credit card, right? Because nobody cared, right? Nobody really thought it was going to be anything. They didn't know what they were going to do with it, right? So they buy it, they put up a website. Somebody inside the organization says, "Woo, that's cool, I want one too." So in Lisa's perfectly governed world, they would go knock on that door and say, "I want one too, can we play together?" But in the world we all know, what happened? They did their own thing, right? And so they did their own thing, and they did their own thing, and they did their own thing, and things just start to grow. And eventually you sort of start to fall into this sort of reckless abandon of people making things and making things that don't make a lot of sense together. There's a little special inflection point at the top of that arc. And here's how you know when you're at it. You've made enough stuff to know what works and what doesn't work. You don't have it all the way, but you got a general sense of what works and doesn't work. At that point, if you want to continue and you want to scale, that's when you govern. So I'm not insisting that at the very inception of a new idea or a new technology that you overburden it with rules and regulations. I'm saying, once you've figured out the thing that you want to scale, think about the impact of it. Think about what standards might need to be followed. All of those sorts of things need to happen then. For the most part, as it relates to the web, nobody did that, so we fell into a pit of chaos. And this chaos is either the World Wide Web at large, social media at large, your enterprise website at large, higher education, which has a special place in my heart for making some of the craziest messes online I have ever seen, because it's full of PhDs that think they're experts on everything and don't want to be governed. So all of those things come in, and they continue until we get to that point that I talked about earlier, right? It's all bad, 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 but eventually you get to a crisis. You get to a point where it's really too much and you can't stand it, and people start deciding that it's time to govern. Before that crisis or right after that crisis, we start having the conversations that we're having now, which is, should we govern or should we not govern? Right, like that we're having this conversation about whether it's a good or bad thing still, to me, honestly, I just can't even. I just can't even. I just, can you tell I'm fed up? I mean, part of it is I've just been shouting and screaming this along with others for such a really long time, but that we're really still asking the question of whether or not we need to govern our digital spaces is just outrageous to me. Absolutely outrageous. And my leg hurts, so I'm not having any of it. Right? Just not having any of it. Anyhow, so how do you get out of the chaos? Let me tell you, it really isn't that hard. You have to put together the right group of people, right? You have to select the right group of people and put them around the table. You have to define what you want to govern, right? So if you're inside of an organization, that's often defining and understanding the scope of digital. And when I work on a digital governance framework, one of the first questions I ask is, so inside your organization, what is digital? And you get a lot of starry-eyed head tilts. And people go, well, it depends. And so probably more than 50% of the conversation of creating the framework is getting people to understand what are we talking about when we're talking about digital. What's that scope? Once you understand that scope, then you start to understand who needs to be in the room when you're talking about creating policies and standards. I'm not talking about a siloed effort of the design team or the tech team or the content strategy team or whoever they are going off in a corner and single-handedly writing out policies and standards that everybody has to follow. I'm talking about a collaborative effort and communicating with each other about what rules need to be followed and how can you create safe and productive things online, right? So that's the first thing that needs to happen. So that process of driving to a standard is how you're going to get to a governing mechanism. You might end up with a really loose governance model, right? People might end up having a tremendous amount of freedom, but very seldom do you have no standards. I mean, I walk in and they go, well, we're like collaborative and we don't do standards, and it's kind of like, okay, you all just handed me the same kind of looking business card, and your mark's the same, and you got these fancy elevators, and I got to give you my fingerprint to get in the building, and all of this stuff. I worked with one of the national labs from the US, and they tried to tell me they don't govern. So it's just that you all haven't decided that you want digital to be in the pile of things that you govern. And I think some of us are just having a little too much fun, and so we don't want to go that way, but I don't care. So we get to this point where you really kind of need to drive to a standard and get to a standard, and that's when you know that you're governing. When you have standards that other people follow, it's an appropriate set of standards, not too tight, not too loose. Following standards doesn't mean that all of the content has to be reviewed by one person. That's an operational concern. You could say, here's the standards, follow them, and have other consequences for people not following standards. So you need to design that framework and the operational framework that supports the implementation of those standards as well. So you've got governance. That's really good. But let's finish this off, right? So you've established a standard. Then you've gotten to this point where you can actually have proactive and safe development, right? That means you're in front of it, right? So I did a project with Intel, and I can mention them because I asked him if I could once. And Scott Rosenberg, who's really a great guy, he's over at Visa now, but I did a governance project with them in their web or whatever. And they were able to improve governance in a really interesting way, and I learned something from him. And one of them was, and I knew this intuitively, but he proved it. It is really easier to do downstream governance upstream governance than downstream governance, right? So it better yet, let's just not put bad things online, right? Instead of putting bad things online and then scrambling around and trying to fix them, let's just make things right in the first place so that we don't have to go around and fix them, because you know that feeling. You've all been in that situation, one side of the fence or the other, where some part of the organization has created some online thing that is completely not right, but they've hired some outside design firm, maybe you are that design firm, right? And they've made it, but it doesn't comply with the standards, and you have to be the one to tell them, you can't put that up, or you're the one being told that you can't put that up. So you've wasted resource, time, you've broken some human spirit of some team that's worked on it, you've maybe messed up some business goals and objectives inside the organization. If you had standards and people knew how to work in the first place, and you communicated those standards to the people who do the work as well as the vendors, then you don't have the same problem. So we really, 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 really want to get ahead of that and in front of that so that we can not have to chastise people for doing that. So you're operating to a standards-based framework, and then you get to this other end here too, which is where it just gets boring. And yes, that's everybody's fear. You don't want a boring job. You have a cool job where you make new fun stuff. Telephones were fun once. TVs were fun once. Cars were super fun once, but you go down the road, and honestly, don't they kind of all look the same? Right? They've all got the same aerodynamic this and the crumple zone and it's not like it was in the 50s when you have fins and all kinds of stuff that were on automobiles, right? So yes, it's gonna get commoditized and boring. It's gonna sit there like a lump, ready to be disrupted by the next thing. No way around it. It's gonna happen. That's the path. That's how it works. We can talk about it later. Meet me in the hall if you can think of a technology that's existed that's taken another path. I would love to hear about it. One of the other things that's really interesting about this, that as this curve moves up, you go from a few people being involved in the making of things to an incredibly large number of people being involved in making things. And the larger the group of people, the more important it is to have governing frameworks in place. It's like inviting everyone in this room to go outside and let's play a game on a field. And I say, go. What game? What are the rules? Eventually what'll happen is you'll get some people, ooh, that was stupid. You get some people playing a game like this over here, some people playing a game and having fun or with corners, but we're not all playing a game together. That's kind of like what the web is. Everyone off in their specialized corner playing their own little funky game. Anyway, so I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Any questions about that? Because I really want you to get that pattern and how that flow works, and I really want you to see that even if you're working not on a whole website, but even on a content team or your front-end developer, that you can apply this sort of flow to that to help bring people together, right? And you can identify where you are in this mechanism. And depending on what you do, you might be in different places. Websites in your organization might be in one spot. Mobile might be in another. Like, so you might be in a chaos pit for mobile and half governing websites. Doesn't matter. So there can be a lot of complexity out of that sort of thing. Okay, I'm going back to my notes. I can get whipped up about this. I'm really sorry. It's near and dear to my heart. So pulling out of this chaos pit is going to be a challenge, but it's not going to be impossible. And so I want to talk about things that you can do, right? I'm going to try and be positive. I'm harking back to the top of the presentation. You want to know that things that you can do. So let's talk about them. Obviously, one of them that's near to my heart and that I'm going to try to do in a more structured way, not sure exactly how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to give it a try, is to try to start to establish a discipline of digital safety, right? We have automobile safety, we have all kinds of product safety. I think we need to think comprehensively about digital safety. Like if we were going to have a crash test or a test crash, I always get them mixed up. One of them's the band. What's the band name? Crash Test Dummies? And is he also a crash test dummy, or is he a he's a crash test dummy. I get it all mixed up. It's hard. It's hard for me. Some things are hard. Governance isn't hard, but crash test dummies are. Anyhow, I like that guy's voice in the crash test dummies. It's like very few guys have low voices in like rock bands. Anyhow, so what we really want to do is let's consider what this would be for digital, right? What do you have to check before you put something online? And I'm not talking that it's the spec that you said it ought to be, right? That it looks and does and feel. I'm talking about safety components. Right now, we're kind of here. It works, it performs well, and it's a good experience. Put it online, right? That's how it gets like this. What about, is it inclusive? Honestly, I'm not much of a griper, but I don't even go through the line that's for the facial recognition technology in the airport. It can't see me. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. It doesn't matter if it's well lit. It doesn't matter if I have on lipstick, my glasses, no glasses. It can't see me, right? It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. It's a waste of time. And it breaks my heart because it means that my needs and the needs of people who look like me weren't even considered when they created the technology. Right? And then it's not just people of color, it's all kinds of things, right? It's like I was talking about, mobility, accessibility on the web. It's a law, for goodness sakes. It's one of the few things that is governed. How many of you all work with websites that you know are not accessible? Hands. It's ridiculous. I mean, person's there with a screen reader, they're trying to have a life, they can't get by. It's heartless, is what it is, right? So inclusive is good. We want it to be moral. We can argue about what morality means, but we could also maybe fairly cleanly state that a lot of things that are going on the web are not moral. They're not morally good, right? So if you want to argue me about what the details of that are, let's have that conversation. I'm up for that conversation, right? We don't have to agree on everything, but let's talk about it. And I want it to just be generally safe. I want it to be safe for children. I wouldn't let my child, even though he's 24 now, so I don't get to say anymore, but when he was little, I wouldn't let my child walk down the street into a porn parlor. But we let them do that online. All they have to do is check a box and say they're 21, right? So, okay, maybe people want to be free to look at porn online. Let's have that conversation. But how can we protect the vulnerable? How can we protect the children, right? How can we protect some of the elderly, which I will be one day, and not just because we can't see small print, but because of elderly people like my parents who are really challenged with the web and don't know how that technology works. That arc will move on, but it's here right now. So how are we going to do that? So that's one of the things that you could do. If that jazzes you, good. Second one, obviously, because I have to say this, is to participate in governance. You've got three choices, okay? You can do digital governance, internet governance, or World Wide Web governance. People always say to me, you should call what you do web governance. And I say, no, I shouldn't. Web governance is governance of the World Wide Web. Internet governance is governance of the internet. And you all know that those are two different things now. Spread the word. right? Digital governance is governance of things that organizations make, right? So I would imagine most of you fall in that world. You either work inside of an organization or you work for an organization creating things online. So if you're going to do digital governance, figure out what the roles and responsibilities are. Buy my book, borrow my book, read the million things that are on digital governance website that are boring but very explanatory, right? And figure out how to create a governance framework, which is really just an accountability chart for who creates strategy, policies, and standards inside your organization, and enforce it. Start the conversation. If you want to do web governance, worldwide web governance, participate in the W3C, the standards-based organization that allows you to have a job in the first place because they create standards for the web. They're not deeply into a lot of the ethical and moral concerns that we talk about, but there are dialogues that are happening in other places. Tim Berners-Lee, several years ago, started the World Wide Web Foundation, right, which is to balance out the work of the W3C. He is horrified at what's happened to the thing that he gave away to the world, of what we'd done to it, right? And so he started this organization and is talking about establishing new policies and regulations. You can participate at the Web Foundation by going to contractfortheweb.org, reading about the contract for the web, signing the contract for the web. It's really easy. It would take you 30 seconds to 1 minute. It would mean everything to Sir Tim and the people involved in that organization if people like you, ordinary people who make things and put them online, would actually sign that contract, tweet about that contract, talk about the values, and help to move this dialogue and conversation on. So if you're super busy, you got little kids, you don't have time in your life right now to take this on in a big way like I do, at the other side of that big bridge of life, sign this. It's easy. The internet. I would imagine many of you all probably don't want to jump into internet governance. It's dealing with things like access to the internet. Access to the internet is, I'm making up numbers now so I could be wrong, maybe at about 50% of the global population have access to the internet right now. We can have philosophical opinions about whether or not people should or should not be connected to the internet, but to have the option to be connected to the internet, I think, is a good thing. So if you're interested in those types of topics, if you're interested in data privacy, and those types of things, those are internet governance things. ISOC and a variety of other organizations are working towards creating policies around that. There is a very, very vibrant conversation in the web and internet governance worlds, and I participate somewhat in those conversations. I'm mostly in the digital world, but I'm aware of them and do participate, and I have to tell you this. That fear that I talked about earlier, where you're kind of scared that people are going to be making rules and they don't really get what you do, that's kind of there a little bit. But the reason is because you aren't participating, right? These are open organizations, right? You don't have to get picked to participate in any of these types of things. So if you actually do care about the frame and the container in which you're going to operate, and you have fears around the types of policies and standards that are going to be controlling the work that you do, participate. And then last but not least, I would have to say, sort of be generous and humble. I was going to try and do that today, but I think I sounded meaner and angrier than I thought. So I'm really sorry about that. There's this kind of rock star mentality that goes along in digital spaces where everybody's kind of stalking the stage and making rock star statements, and that's really good and it's really entertaining. I can be more like that when I don't have a cane. It's been really interesting having this cane and having to stand here because it's made me have to give a different type of talk, a more somber and kind of pointed talk, because this is all that I have the capacity to do right now. But it's also made me realize it's really good to submit your ego sometimes. This is not about us making the perfect thing or being the rock star of design or whatever. It's about building this web and keeping it safe for all of us. Volvo engineers actually donated the patent for the seatbelt to the world. They didn't have to do that. They could have really just made a bunch of money off of it. And as I mentioned earlier, Tim Berners-Lee and the folks at CERN donated the web. They donated what we now all work on. They didn't have to do that, right? So that other people are on it, grabbing these spaces and controlling us and creating bad things really, really pisses me off. So don't be that way. Try to be humble. Okay, so in closing, I want to tell you a little bit more about my hopes and my beliefs. And I want to know what you believe too. So if you see me in the hall and you don't like what I said or whatever, tell me. I want to have a conversation. Especially if you don't agree with me, I want to have a conversation. Not because I want to get in your face and tell you you're wrong, but because I want to solve the problem. We're going to only solve the problem if we talk to each other. So here's what I believe. I believe that we can make better choices. That we can have better intent in this space. I think that things are the way they are because we've allowed them to be that way, not because they must. If exploitation can be a business model, so can fairness. If snarkiness and telling people to go fuck themselves online can be a way to build a profile and a career, so can compassion and expressions of caring. That is the good news. We have free will, all of us that build the web. If we choose to be this way, we can choose to be another way. And when it comes to the way that we are online, I think it's time to make a different choice. In my mind, there's urgency, but I sort of have to calm myself down because good solutions to rich problems, particularly as it relates to governing new technologies, have to be considered and designed, again, with intent. It will take time, more time than we like. If we intend for our web to be a safe and compassionate environment, a community, then we need to design and govern around those values, and we need to take the time to do it right. First, we need to be intentional about who's doing the designing, especially for our .com community. We can't expect the same organizations and people who created the mess to be the ones to come up with the solutions. Sure, they need to be participants at the table, but we cannot expect them to lead or to have all of humanity's best interest at heart. That's not their job. If we intend for our web to be safer and more compassionate, we need to look at the problem through a prism of humanity, not one of profitability. When I see news headlines that show the heads of big .coms working with world leaders to somehow solve some of the problems of the web, I get nervous. It reminds me of the reconstruction of the South after the US Civil War. And we all know how that worked out. Or at least I hope you do. If you don't, look it up on Wikipedia. There's nothing wrong with business. I've owned and operated businesses for almost 25 years. And while I can lean in socialist directions when it comes to education and healthcare and other fundamentals that lead to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I also believe in entrepreneurship, but never at the expense of the human community. When .com leaders lead the web reform effort, the possibilities for reform are immediately limited. Those leaders often want us to believe that some problems are hard to solve, when in fact, they're not. What they believe is that a problem is hard to solve because solving it might put their business and profitability at risk. They frame the problem as if their businesses are essential, as if their business's existence is a necessary component of the human community, when it's not. What they present as a complex challenges of business are really just fundamental lapses in governance. Until they accept the responsibility for self-governance and participate in industry-wide governance initiatives that put human rights first, and until we insist that they accept that responsibility, they will continue to undermine the human community, and we will be in it with them. Those of us on the entitled end of the spectrum, and that's likely everyone in this room, need to remember that in our siloed world full of digital makers, we sometimes conflate the fulfillment of basic human needs with the creation of a personalized and delightful web experience. For example, we have a right to food and shelter, but not to a 24/7 bespoke food delivery and a smart home. We have a right to access and a free and open web, but not the right to abuse others in that forum. And we, the architects of the online experience, shouldn't forget that. As we drive deeper into living our lives online, we should not forget that we're still part of something bigger. That when the lights are out and the web down, we still need to get along because we're the human family. And to me, that's worth a lot. That's something worth saving. Thank you. Thanks. I'm happy to take a few questions if you have them, and while we're searching for anybody who has a question, points of reference, my book, Managing Chaos, Digital Governance by Design. If you really want to make a digital governance framework, read it. It's not that hard. It really isn't. I think the hardest part is getting your heart into it. And then, just not to promote myself, there are a few other resources. Gentleman who's written a book called Future Ethics. If you're interested in ethics, I know several of you are giving talks. I'm hoping to be able to sit into one of them. The book that I mentioned earlier by James Glick, which is The Information, A History, a Theory, a Flood. It's like an 800-word book or something. I think I've read it 3 times. Great book. Then a colleague of mine has recently written a book called The Power of Digital Policy that talks about some of the practical ways to create policy as well. So hopefully some of those things might be helpful for some of you all. Thank you so much for listening to me in this talk. I know it's not exactly in your wheelhouse, but I hope it gave you something to think about, and I'm happy to take any questions or have a conversation. Anyone? Here's somebody. Oh, the lights.
Hi, so first of all, thank you. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
I work for one of those .coms that have kind of a global reach.
Yep.
And I often find myself in conversations with particular technical coworkers around but that's Northern California ethics, for example.
You find yourself in conversation with whom?
More technical
Okay.
coworkers
Yep.
who say, well, but that's just Northern California ethics that you're talking about, for example. So I'm wondering if you have some resources or thoughts around how we can sort of talk about ethics in kind of a bigger way, even globally, when we're thinking about governance, because that's something I struggle with a lot.
I'm not sure what you're asking me. I think I missed the Northern California. Oh, you mean the conversation being localized versus global?
Yes, exactly.
Well, what's interesting about that whole thing is, I don't know that I have anything to say, but I can always talk. The thing that's really interesting that people seem to forget and whole countries forget, and some of them are working hard at it, like China's got a great firewall of China. I mean, some of them are succeeding. The countries just turn the internet on and off at will for their citizenry, and so that's different. But it is a worldwide web, right? And so I think that the dialogue is going to have to be, for the most part, a global dialogue. Or it's a possibility that it might disintegrate into a more localized conversation, and we might see more things such as the putting down of firewalls around various nations. It's not the intent of the founders, but oftentimes technology takes a different turn. So I think a lot of the conversations that are happening in the W3C, even your own board, is an international one. So I think attending international events and having conversations that are multinational and not only topic focused. So one of the interesting things about working with big global multinational companies is that they exist all over the world, and so when we're writing governing frameworks for them, the rules are different in one part of the world and compared to another, but it's still one governing framework. So I think it's possible to have a global ethical framework, but the conversation to create that framework can't be US-centered, which it often is, right? And it's got to be take into account a variety of points of view. So I hope that was something. Anyone else? No, somebody in the middle had their hand raised. Did they leave? I answered your question? Okay, well, oh, do you have one?
I've got one for you.
Hi.
So let's say you gave the example of the automobile industry. And let's say we could go back in time and knowing what we know now, we could set up a governing board and we might pick 3 things to fix. A, your windshield doesn't cut your head off. B, you don't burst into flames. And C, there's some way to belt you into your seat so you don't get ejected from the car. Is there a punch list like that you would bring to the World Wide Web?
I don't know what it is, but in theory, yes. So, when Twitter was started and I found out that basically anybody could make up information and get a Twitter account, maybe it's because I'm governance girl, but a little thing went in my head and went, that's not a good idea. I mean, how many people knew that wasn't a good idea? Right? I mean, some things are obvious, right? And so I think there is a punch list, right? And that's and I think, I don't like to govern and stifle too early, but there's also common sense and there's also basic safety, right? And so making sure that you can minimize things at the very beginning, I think is important. And I think that punch list can exist. There are probably issues around privacy and abuse that could be addressed and just told that this is not what you are allowed to do online. And yes, there's going to be gray areas. People are always then they want to get into that, how many angels can dance on a head of a pin. I was a freaking philosophy major. Don't do that dance with me. I can dance that dance all day long, right? That dance never ends, right? At a certain point, you just have to take the needle off, stop. I'm old, see, take the needle off. Take the needle off, stop the music, but y'all are into vinyl, I know. Take the needle off. It's funny, I have this kick-ass record collection that I got rid of that my son's kicking me. But anyhow, at some point you have to take the needle off and say, we've danced a dance, we know the moves, this is what it is, right? And you move on from there. And then if you need to adjust later, going on. So yes, there can be a punch list. I don't know what it is. Maybe we can figure it out. Can't be that hard. There's so many low-hanging fruit. It's not like we have to go down on a mystery tour and try and figure out what's wrong that's going on. Was there anyone else? One other, and then honestly, I've got to sit down. You did good, Mr. Legg.
Hi, I'm Jeff
Hi.
Johnson, professor at the University of San Francisco and former chair of Computer Professionals for Social Responsibility.
Yay. You know the punch list. Okay.
Well, Professor Moshe Vardi at Rice University recently had an article in CACM saying that hippies basically broke the internet, or basically what he said was when the internet was formed, the rallying cry that was popular at the time was information wants to be free.
I remember that.
And
But
he
people
says
only
that's
that.
why the internet, not the web necessarily, but the internet is broken now. This is his argument, not mine. That it's broken because everyone wants everything to be free, and therefore the business model has to be ads. And because the business model is ads, there has to be targeted. Ads have to be targeted, which means information has to be collected, which means blah, blah, blah. Okay?
Right.
And so he says that no, the internet, in order to fix it, and by extension, the web as well, the way to fix it is to make it a cost-based business model in which you subscribe to Facebook, you pay $10 a month or $15 a month for your service, and the ads don't have to be targeted anymore.
Well, I mean, that's one solution. I mean, the information has to be free quote. I wish I had a slide in here. And I can't remember, honestly, because I'm just a little bit absent-minded today, but people quote that quote, but not the rest of it. If you read the rest of that quote, it colors it slightly different. People like to pull that part out as well. And so, yeah, for pay is interesting. I made a decision last week just because I just, anybody else like wake up in the morning, have your morning beverage, do your thing, get on Twitter, and are just instantly bummed out? Right? Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, okay, I just can't do that anymore, and I don't want to be on the line anymore. So I resubscribed to paper newspapers and magazines that I've been reading online. And I realized how much of that information I was consuming that I hadn't been paying for. So there's a whole generation of people who think you don't have to pay for information, and they're right, you don't, right? But the quality of that information degrades. So I think that is a conversation worth having. Do I know the absolute right answer? Did hippies break the internet? I don't care. What cynical Lisa really thinks is that there's a very small minority of people who hold all the coins, right, who have built these business models, and most of us work with them or for them because they hold all the coins, and that's what they want. They want it to be free. They're not hippies. They're like extreme capitalists. So that's what I think. So I don't think that's not a hippie, right? A hippie doesn't have any money and is stoned half the time and really is like talking, like I'm young enough to remember hippies. I went to an experimental elementary school. I was raised by hippies, right? So I know what a hippie is. Mark Zuckerberg is not a hippie. So anyhow, I've got to take, it says 000, which means I don't have any more time or the world's going to explode. So I'm going to get off the stage. Enjoy and have a great conference.